Recording. All right. Next thing I want to share is my screen. So I'm going to share desktop number 2. Okay. Everybody see PowerPoint?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So actually this starts this PowerPoint starts with verse 17, but I'll read 16 for you and then go on. So, verse 16, and you shall consume all the peoples that the Lord your God will give over to you. Your eye shall not pity them, neither shall you serve their gods, for that would be a snare to you. If you say in your heart, these nations are greater than I, how can I dispose of them? You shall not be afraid of them, but you shall remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all Egypt, the great trials that your eyes saw, the signs, the wonders, the mighty hand, and the outstretched arm by which the Lord your God brought you out. So will the Lord your God do to all the peoples of whom you are afraid. Moreover, the Lord your God will send hornets among them until those who are left and hide themselves from you are destroyed. You shall not be in dread of them, for the Lord your God is in your midst, a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will clear away these nations before you little by little. You may not make an end of them at once, lest the wild beasts grow too numerous for you. But the Lord your God will give them over to you and throw them into great confusion until they are destroyed. And he will give their kings into your hand, and you shall make their name perish from under heaven. No one shall be able to stand against you until you've destroyed them. The carved images of their gods you shall burn with fire. You shall not covet the silver or the gold that is on them, or take it for yourselves, lest you be ensnared by it. For it is an abomination to the Lord your God. And you shall not bring an abominable thing into your house and become devoted to its destruction like it. You shall utterly detest and abhor it, for it is devoted to destruction. All right. So, what do you think about that little piece of scripture there?
Wipe them
Nice.
out. All it reminds me of the quote from a Star Wars movie. Wipe them out, all of them. Just literally wipe them out and their stuff. Leave no trace.
Okay. Yeah, it's quite harsh, isn't it?
Yeah, you think?
Mm, more than harsh.
Okay. Well,
But
go ahead.
wasn't this where they made their mistake 20 years before that?
In,
Where
in,
they
in what
sent their
way?
spies in and spies said we can't beat them, so we're and I think God's like giving them a little nudge. He said, don't make the same mistake twice.
Yeah, I think there's probably echoes of those past experiences there. Um,
But God's offering to pretty much put them in their hands. I mean, he's not expecting them to go in there and destroy them by themselves. He's going to be right there helping them along. Am I reading this right?
Yeah, that's what he's saying to them.
So they have to trust him that he's going to stand by his word, or they understand what he's saying. I mean, if God said something like that to any of us, I think we'd have to say, I don't know. You think he's telling me the truth? It's going to leave me hanging eventually.
so, eh, eh, why do you think there's such a harsh stance by God?
Because they don't have a good past.
Okay, they don't have a good past.
With what he's told them to do.
Okay, so it's a little harsher because he already knows who they are, knows what they're capable of based on past history.
I guess.
And these
Okay,
people are not Israelites, right? I mean, they're the people that lived there before the Israelites got there.
correct. For the
Mhm.
people that have lived there on the land.
Mhm.
Yeah, they still need to be apart. They still need to be separate. They don't need to integrate or assimilate or take from others and build from that. They needed to, start from the very bottom, from the very beginning, but they could be nothing else, no other peoples in those lands,
Okay.
no other gods, and they couldn't covet the gold or the silver.
What
But he
did
didn't say anything about the animals.
Yeah, nothing about animals. Nothing
So I
about the
guess the
animals.
animals they could keep, huh?
Well, I think in some ways what what he's talking about here are, so in the ancient Near East, all gods were represented by statuaries, okay, made out of, usually precious metals. So you think about when Moses went up on Mount Sinai and he was gone for a prolonged period of time, uh, Aaron was convinced uh, by the crowd left behind to fashion a golden calf. So that golden calf, as where did they get the idea of a golden calf from? Didn't just come out of thin air. It's based upon their experience, probably in Egypt, based on their experience with other peoples that they had encountered in the land. And so, each god would have, a representation. And so, I guess the 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 temptation is, okay, we're not going to maybe not worship the god, but let me take the gold because it's worth a lot of money. All right, so you know God commands the Israelites to destroy all the idols and resist compromise with the surrounding nations. Okay, and as Herman said, it's to ensure that they remain pure and that they are connected to Him. And so we have this idea of idolatry. Okay. And so what is an idol? Okay. It's anything that takes God's place in our heart or hinders our obedience to Him. Um, so why are idols so important as they go into the promised land?
So important to the people or so important in the story?
Yes and yes.
I was afraid of that. Well, I mean, for them, what they've done up to this point is they have these idols that they're like a sign for them that they can, worship the thing, and it travels along with them and they put them out. Um, and so if they want, harvest, or they want to pray for rain or whatever, they can offer sacrifice to those things.
So in some ways we could say that they offer maybe some security because they're visible and tangible,
Hmm.
and Yahweh is neither visible nor tangible. Okay, so great. So visible and tangible. What else? Or why else?
Well, there's multiple gods too,
Okay.
and they're going in with a only one God. That's going to be a drastic change for to
O-
enforce.
Okay. So this idea of the sovereignty of one versus, the multiplicity of numbers. Anything else?
I guess, also this probably ties in with the visible and tangible thing, but it gives them something to, like a holy place or something to protect or keep sacred. Like there's a space for that wherever they go
You mean if they had an idol that they'd have a place
to
for it?
worship. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Uh-huh. Anything else? Okay. Well, let's explore a little bit. So I said that, when we read this, that God was harsh. Okay. He was very adamant in his just commands to completely destroy idols and avoiding compromise. Why is it? Why is that?
Well, isn't there a commandment to all other idols before nobody worship? Well, not that fast. I forgot what I was going to say. How I was going to say.
No other gods before
Go,
me.
go, no other gods before me. Thank you, Jeanette. As it's starting to come out of my mouth, I'm getting all confused. But that was what number one commandment. He's very adamant about that. I don't have a problem with being adamant about destroying the idols. It's just kind of like being harsh about destroying the other people. That's kind of like harsh. But
Okay. So how do you, if you're going to go into a land, I think one of the things we have to think about here is kind of the way that we typically view the world and view life is very different than the ancients.
mm,
So, all of life was tied to a god and therefore tied to an idol. Um, and so if you're going to go into a land, how would you destroy an idol without destroying the people?
they're going to fight you about it. So yeah, can't do one without the other, I guess.
Yeah, so they're kind of intricately connected, unlike us today. All right, so what's a snicker for?
Well, our idols are,
Oh yeah, that's the next question.
yeah. I mean, the study that came out today that was all over the news about, I don't know if you saw this, the doom scrolling study.
Oh no, did anybody else hear about that?
No.
Yeah, that like
Okay.
I mean, of course we all know this anecdotally, but now they're saying that neuroscientists have studied and that the doom scrolling, what it's doing is it's killing your brain cells. That, that part of the brain it's deadening when you're looking at, I don't know, Instagram for hours on end. It's
Right,
actually disconnecting instead of activating the neurons
right.
that make connections.
I can
So,
Yeah,
see
because they're
that.
not using that part of the brain.
mhm.
I mean, if you look at it, there's very little, like just for example, the arts. There's very little original stuff out in the arts. There's no great authors anymore, great movies anymore. It's just rehashing, me making the same stuff over and over again. And I really, kids don't write in school anymore. Remember, you have to essays and stuff. Kids don't get to use that part of the brain anymore, I guess. It's too easy just to look up everything on Facebook or online or whatever. I can see that.
Yeah, this is a weird, I hardly ever am going to say this. I disagree a little bit with that because for the first time in a decade, maybe, today I gave a quiz and I got the most fascinating answers from
Really?
these kids, really high level of thought, intelligent. And I'm doing a unit on history of science right now that goes from Plato and Aristotle all the way through to Copernicus and Newton. And man, and like there's no textbook or anything that goes with this unit. I've just been teaching them for like a week and a half to 2 weeks about this stuff from what I know. And they've been like wrapped in attention with this story.
Really?
And
Well, that's
I
good to
mean,
know.
it was deep thought, and they had no references out, whatever on this quiz today. I was impressed. And this is not the ninth graders. Ninth graders, I'm ready to flush down the toilet. But the older kids, um, so yeah, that's they can write and they can create, I think. Um, but this other stuff about what they're distracted by is like, the social media piece is
Hmm.
threatening and real.
Okay. So back to the original question. Why is God so adamant about completely destroying idols and avoiding compromise?
Because he doesn't want us distracted from attention to him.
Okay, so you're saying that God's jealous and
No.
he's acting as out of a position of jealousy?
No, no.
Hmm. Okay,
It's
I thought that's what I heard.
No, this is like you're walking on a balance beam, and if there's nothing around to distract you, you can focus on walking the balance beam and you're not going to fall off and hurt yourself. But if you're walking the balance beam and there's a three-ring circus and a cotton candy machine, you're going to be looking every which way and fall off the balance beam
Mm.
and hurt
O-
yourself.
Okay. So God is the what do you call that of the circus? The
Ringmaster.
Ringmaster?
ringmaster, thank you.
Yeah,
He's the ringmaster of the circus.
keeping our eye on the focus, the prize. Yeah.
Okay. So then in some way, okay, it's not out of a position of jealousy, but rather out of a position of concern.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
concern,
he wants them to stay focused, like Debbie said.
but why?
Because he loves us.
Mhm.
Okay. So, but why, I know he loves us, but why does he want us to stay focused? Because if we don't stay focused, what does it lead to?
Temptation.
Temptation, which leads to,
Destruction, death, and
Sin.
thank
destruction.
you, death and destruction. Death and destruction. Okay. Um, we spend a lot of time, going backwards. Um, and so if we think about the garden for a minute, what was the challenge there? Was there an idol there?
Power,
Pow,
knowledge.
yep, yep. Power and knowledge, and you know, when that becomes, something that what supersedes God, it leads to, death and destruction. Yeah. So when we think about God's harshness, um, and his exactness, when it comes to especially destroying idols and avoid compromising. Uh, it's not because he's jealous. It's because it's out of an act of love. Because you know idol worship leads to death, leads to destruction, and we see that Adam and Eve. We see that. What are some other examples prior to Deuteronomy that we could think of?
The guys, the sons of Aaron, that went into because they thought they could get close to the holy place and
Okay.
overstepped.
Okay.
The first thing popped in my head was Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, is that later on past this?
That's after this, but no, it's before this. It's way before
Mhm.
this. The golden calf is a big one.
Mhm.
Mm.
Okay. And so we understand that. So now we come to the today, what are some of the idols or distractions we face today? I mean, Dev mentioned one. It's the mind numbingness of probably a lot of the internet, but in particular, social media.
I guess social status too, if you like talk to teenagers anyway. I mean, but it probably applies to adults too, of, popular crowd, power, same thing.
Because they
The
want to
more,
be
more bigger.
okay.
Everybody wants more. They want bigger.
Okay.
I guess it's what you value that is a motivator. So if you value social status, or if you value being in the in crowd, wearing the right clothing,
Hmm.
you can find that in what is it that they call them? Influencers.
Yeah, influence. Yeah.
So those individuals, you may value those things, and then that becomes your, I shouldn't say your religion, but that becomes your focus of attention, and that's where you put all your energy and effort
Right.
instead of God.
Yeah, it does. It's in fact, it's not your religion, it's your God.
Hmm.
It becomes your God. It's the thing that you worship and your thing that you pursue and want to have. All right. So there's lots of different idols and distractions in the world today,
Oh, yeah.
eh? Okay. So what and I would imagine that probably for each one of us there's some temptations for that. We all have our particular idols, I would imagine, if we're honest with one another.
And it could be as simple as a car
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
or jewelry
Clothes,
and
Hmm.
clothing. And
knowledge.
what are the Kardashians doing? What's
Yeah,
in?
yeah. So,
More midriff, big split on the side.
Taylor
so
Swift.
yeah,
Taylor
well,
Swift's another
Taylor
one.
Swift. There you go.
yeah. So there's lots of that, and like I said, if we're honest with ourselves and we're honest with each other, we all have struggles with those kinds of things.
Well, it reminds me of that song. I forget now who wrote it, but Jesse probably you'll remember "The Heart of Worship."
I'm coming
Um,
back to the heart of worship.
What a worship.
yeah, that who wrote that?
Uh,
But it was
Heart of
this.
worship is hang on a second. It is
But the story had to do with this kind of thing where, like, the church was whatever that church was all about, like the flash and the glitter and the glam and the music and the this and the that and the other, and it missed out on what the worship was really about.
Mhm.
uh
Mm-hmm.
I believe that was Matthew Redman.
What was it? But what was the religion like? Do you know the story of that though? Like he wrote this
Uh,
thing about why he wrote
s-
that song.
Song story. Hold on, let me see. I can just let me see. The song dates back to the late 1990s, born from a period of apathy within Matt's home church, Soul Survivor in Watford, England.
Hmm.
Despite the country's overall contribution to the current worship revival, Redmond's congregation was struggling to find meaning in its musical outpouring at the time. There was a dynamic missing, so the pastor did a pretty brave thing, he recalls. He decided to get rid of the sound system and band for a season, and we gathered together with just our voices. His point was that we had lost our way in worship, and the way to get back to the heart would be to strip everything away. And this is before long, we introduced the musicians and sound system as we gain new perspective that worship is all about Jesus and he commands a response in the depths of our souls, no matter what the circumstance and setting. And that's what it's based on. It says Redmond remembers writing the song quickly in his bedroom soon after the church's journey together with no grand intentions by any means for it to become an international anthem. He reviewed the words simply as his personal subjective response to what he was learning about worship. So, question number 3 there. So we've all, I think we've all affirmed that there's idols, that we all struggle with that. So how do we actively resist the temptation to compromise our faith and put our hope, our strength, our focus on idols?
Hmm. Easier said than done. Sometimes we just get caught up in it. But
Well, yeah, I would say easier said than done, and sometimes we get caught on it. But if we kind of look at the scripture, God kind of gets a little miffed about that, don't you think?
oh yeah, definitely.
So it's probably something we should probably spend a little time, give a little thought to.
You can say, I guess, I think the most temptation today, of course, is internet. Just avoid it if we can. But that's not always possible either. But just
Well,
don't. I mean, it's not even avoiding it. It's just not becoming obsessed with it, I guess. But
well, I think the first kind of order of business is really um you can't avoid what you don't see, don't understand. And so I think as a springboard, before we can say how do we resist something instead of just kind of putting stuff out there, I think it's probably important that we remember what Herman said. So if we think about, how do we determine what an idol is for us? Because it's different from each one of us. I mean, there's lots of folks that, can engage with the internet, engage with social media, and it's really not an idol for them. So we you can't just say, "Oh, okay, we're just going to avoid that," and that works for it may work for some. So let's Herman, what did you say idols were again?
It is what we value.
Okay, what we value. Okay. So we got to first kind of ask the question of ourselves, what is it that we value? And is it just a matter of just value? Because each one of us value things, but
Right,
are they
right.
necessary or worship? I mean, I
That's correct.
value in education, but does that mean that I worship it?
That's
no.
correct. So, what came to my mind is that even though we may value some things more than others, keep them in perspective. so that we value God more than other things. So we may value jewelry, we may value a car, we may value the relationship that we have with others. But if we value our relationship with God as primary one and not allow the other ones to interfere with that or distract us from God, I think it's putting things into perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, so I think, the first thing, how do we actively resist the temptation to compromise our faith? I think we need to honestly ask ourselves, each one of us, because it's different for each one of us.
Mhm.
Our values and what we're going to put our time, talent, and energy into is a lot different. Um, what we value is what we put our time, our talent, and our resources into. Um, so I think the first thing is we need to honestly, you know, identify, what are the idols in our life. And then after we've identified them, okay, then what do we do?
Try to burn them. Basically, you go back to that passage. It's like destroy, destroy, if you can, but it's really hard to do that.
Uh-huh.
no. They said you need to destroy others' idols.
That's true.
And the
Hmm.
assumption is that our God is primary in our lives, period.
Hmm.
But we should be influenced by others' idols or take on others' idols.
Hmm.
But
Or, go ahead, I'm sorry, Herman.
it's tough. There's a premise in psychiatry that what we value is what motivates us.
I believe that.
So that if you find out what somebody values is what will motivate them. So you can use that motivation to help them overcome whatever. So
But yeah, but here's this becomes a literal struggle is if you are valuing the Christian life and trying to be the hands and feet of Jesus and do the work that you're kind of called to do by being given grace, you can get stretched so thin. Like, and where do you stop? Because then that's not really an idol. It's just sort of like you're doing God's work, but it's just, you know,
But are you valuing the work or are you valuing the God?
you're valuing that God is calling you to do the work, I guess. But there can be just so much of it.
Yeah,
well, there's you need to um, redefine that. So are you valuing God or are you valuing the work? So
Mm,
if the work gives you meaning, that is different than if you just value God. So if you value God, you're going to do the work, but it's going to, I think, from my perspective, I would be more balanced with that. But if I value the work, then that may be too much of a draw, and I think that would be consuming. So if you're getting meaning and purpose from the work, and that's all you're pursuing, is you're getting that validation from the work, is all that dopamine
mm,
hit. So it's not going to be very healthy.
mm-hmm,
And you may think that you're your primary goal is God, but if your primary goal is really doing the work, is going to be consuming.
What do others think? And there's quiet.
Sometimes I don't think we realize that we are not compromising our faith, but we're putting other things ahead. I don't think we realize it sometimes. We do it and it doesn't even enter our mind that we're doing something. We're putting something first before God. It just sort of happens.
Okay. Well, that's good. So, um, so what you said is sometimes we don't realize it, or sometimes we can't see it. And I said that, okay, we need to be able to see something before we can deal with it, correct?
Yeah.
So if that's a truth, does everybody think that that's a truth?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So I'm taking a straw poll here. It seems like all of us think that that's truth, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you ask a question like that, it means we're not right.
No, 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 no. So I believe that is truth. And
Okay.
so what becomes the springboard in order to overcome that?
Finding intentional ways to connect to God.
Okay, so maybe, but if we're not, so we're trying to maybe uncover something that's not, visible for us. So
Oh, that's
how
interesting. So, from my perspective, from the psychological perspective, how I conceptualize it is more like awareness would be the first step to change, but being aware, what you're saying is seeing it,
Mhm.
becoming aware. Um, so for us, if our subconscious or preconscious is keeping it from us, and we're focusing awareness on other things, or should I say, attention on other things, so the and we're not seeing that we're not focusing on God and focusing on other distractions, and we're not seeing that. So, what would be the antidote? So, could the antidote be a ritual to pull us back and make us focus on something? And then we forget the ritual, we forget the prayer, we forget the Sabbath. And before you know it, your life has taken a different path.
Okay,
Uh,
so
so
you're talking about adding rituals?
yes, adding
Mhm.
rituals, adding particular behaviors
Mhm.
that will uh, bring us back to the to to give us that inner compass to bring us back to our destination or our aim.
Okay.
Uh,
That's sounds good.
The idols are stuff that we can't, or we'd like to attain, maybe. And I think I forget now where I was going to go with this, but and maybe when you realize that you can't attain all this stuff, or you go back to God and you realize that all these idols aren't that important to you. Um, I just I just remember one of the big things in my my life, and I guess it was an idol, was when I was first married, first moved here in this house. I had friends who had these had moved into brand new houses. They were big and they were beautiful. And I used to come home and I used to say, I want to set fire to my house. I mean, it was like, you know, suddenly, you know, I started realizing how thankful I have that I have this house. You know, it might not be a mansion, but it's what it was what God gave me in this life. And I need to appreciate. I always said, you know, once in a while people go, "Oh, in my next life." Well, I'm always afraid to say that because in my next life I might be living in a cardboard box by the side of a dump. You know, so I try to be very grateful and not try to look at big houses and say, "Oh, gee, I wish I've lost that." That was something that was back in my younger days. But you have to, I guess, circle around and realize that this stuff isn't that important anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if I if I hear you correctly, um, there's joy and there's perspective to be found in being grateful.
And I think that's where, the idols distract us from being grateful for what we have. It might not be the best of everything, but you got to be grateful. And
Okay,
idols, I think, suck us away from all that stuff.
okay, so what what can that look like then? I agree with you 100%. People that are grateful um tend to be ones who are very, first of all, they tend to be more mindful of God, mindful of God's blessings, tend to be more joyful. Um, and so it has a lot of positive, you know, um, uh, things associated with it. But how how grateful and how thankful are we typically?
Not very.
Not very often.
Okay, good. So, um, if we are pretty poor at being grateful, how do we overcome that? We say it's a good thing, and it's something that maybe we should strive to do, strive to incorporate. But how does one do that?
Count your blessings.
What
Mhm.
does that mean?
It means look for the. It's a stupid song, but I always think about it. That there's a Monty Python song called "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life."
Always look on the
That's the
bright
one.
side of life.
Yeah, just
Uh-huh.
instead of looking for the icky parts, like try to, oh, it's raining outside. You could be, oh, it's raining outside, or like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad it's finally raining. Like we need this rain. Look at the Wallingford Reservoir.
Yeah.
Just kind of finding the blessing in stuff that looks like it's bad.
Okay, so looking at the blessings and things that are bad. Okay.
And what is it going to take to get to reach your idols? I mean, does this mean you're going to have to work 12, 12 hours a day? You're going to sacrifice other things for a few extra bucks or whatever? I mean, it's just, you got to put it all in perspective and realize that not every idol is attainable. I mean, you may be focused on obtaining this or that, but is it worth it? To me, I'd rather drive a 13-year-old car with 100,000 miles on it than have a car payment. That that car doesn't mean, that's not an idol for me to have a nice new car. I'm fine with what I have. It's what it's going to take to manage to have that. And is that what I want to do? So I don't know. It's crazy.
Hmm.
Back to this gratefulness thing. So if we stink at it, how can we get better at it? So I hear one thing we can do is in kind of the negative things, look for positives.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, I mean,
No.
with the kids when they were younger, we used to, have this intentional thing at dinner every night, go
What?
around the table.
Excuse me. What was that?
Intentional.
What?
Intentional.
I think
And
you said
so
the
what?
magic word.
Yeah. So what does intentional mean?
It means that you carve out time for it and you make sure to do it. Like you
Okay.
focus, you like say, okay, I am being grateful right now. And it becomes a habit.
Okay.
Okay. So let me tell you what I did. You know how we make New Year's decisions or commitments um, whatever we will do. I'll usually think about this for a while, and then I'll make a decision on what I'm going to do, and intentionally I work on it through the rest of the year. So what I did with the gratitude is maintaining an attitude of gratitude. So that was my commitment for that New Year's decision that I made, and I worked at it, made the purpose of maintaining an attitude of gratitude throughout the whole year. So initially, you have to be mindful, you have to be aware, you have to remember it, and then gradually over time, you integrate it into your behaviors. So it was my experience of maintaining an attitude of gratitude was that it made me more peaceful, more at peace, I should say.
Mhm.
Hey, hey, Herman.
Yeah.
So as you identified that, and I'm going to call it your goal, your yearly goal, what you can
Mhm.
call it, whatever you want. And so as you thought about that, as you developed it, you said that you needed to, in the beginning, kind of keep it in the forefront of your mind before
Yes.
it became habitual. How did you do that?
Um, well, there's different things that you can do, but definitely you have to write it down.
Ah,
So you have to have it in your presence. So it could be so that it reminds you on a daily basis so you don't forget it, because we have a tendency to forget. So to develop a new behavior, you need to be aware of it. And then with the awareness, then you have choices. You can either continue to do the old things that you were doing or do the new thing that you have decided to do. So you can either, not have that attitude of gratitude, or you can maintain that attitude of gratitude. And since that was my goal, to maintain that attitude of gratitude, was seeing all the good things about, like Debbie says, it's raining outside. Oh, it's finally raining. So, it's going to benefit the drought, or it's going to benefit the plants. So you're not looking at it from a negative perspective, but a positive perspective. You have a flat tire. Great. At least it was not a car accident. So it could always be worse. So you maintain that attitude of gratitude. Thank you, God, for just giving me a flat tire. I didn't roll the car. Things like that. So you find that life is not as um, using Debbie's work, icky. So that things are not as bad.
Mhm.
They
right.
could always be worse.
Did you ever see there's an I love this movie, old movie, Jimmy Stewart, bless you,
Thank you.
called Harvey.
Yes.
I love this movie. So anybody else see this movie?
Mhm.
That the rabbit? See what the rabbit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Harvey is a puka. He's a giant white rabbit, and only Elwood P. Dowd can see him. Well, at least at the beginning of the movie. And but Elwood is this man who he is kind and nice and pleasant to everybody. And he explains this at one point in the movie, he said that, my mother gave me a choice of being oh so smart or oh so pleasant. I chose pleasant. And everybody loves being around him because he is just so positive all the time. And it's a choice that he made to be like that. If you've not seen Harvey, I recommend it.
Mm. Where can one find that movie?
It's an old black and white movie, so it's probably on Netflix. I mean, it
If
would
you
be in it.
Google, if
Yeah.
you Google a movie, it'll say watch it, and they'll give you a list of whether
Okay.
it's YouTube, Prime, Netflix, whatever. They usually
Okay.
tell you.
Yeah, it might be a fun one, like we have movie nights. It might be a fun
Yeah.
one to watch.
Okay.
It's so good.
Yep. So, so we found that this idea of gratefulness is an important one. I I I hope you're hearing what we have to do. So, like Herman said, if we're going to if you identify that that's an important thing that you want to do, that you first need to do what?
Planet.
Plan it, write it down, keep it in the forefront. Um, we must be kindred spirits there, Herman, because that's been my goal this year. Um, and so I call it my gratefulness journal. So every morning I, do my devotions. And as part of that devotional process is I think about the day. It's usually the day before, go through the day before my head and identify a minimum of 5 things that I'm grateful for. And I do that intentionally at the beginning of the day because it then begins to uh, frame the day as I'm moving into it.
Right.
All right.
I did that once for a week. And the rule it was a part of a kind of course that I was doing, and we had to do 20 of them a day, twice a day, and they couldn't repeat
Wow.
It's
Ever?
interesting.
ever. So it
Huh.
had to be 20 different ones at the start of a day, at the end of a day. They were not allowed to repeat. And it had to be like the front and I mean, like if you could, I mean, it could be a repeat if you weren't intentionally cheating. You know what I mean? Like I know I
Mhm.
said the sun was right yesterday, but like if you flubbed it up and put something twice just because you weren't kind of conscious of that, it was okay. But like that was the goal, was to like look for everything. And it was kind of made an impression. It was
Mm.
life changing, I think.
At first, it becomes hard, isn't it?
Oh my gosh. Well, when you're getting down to like number 19 and 20, like
We
I don't
we
know.
we tend to forget the little things that are blessings,
Hmm.
in your day. Just getting up and putting your feet on the floor, it's really a blessing. Some people can't do that.
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
just simple things of everyday things. Seeing a flower that you haven't seen all winter. Just the simplest things that are just as important as the big things.
Yep.
Mhm.
That's but I've tried to do that too, do blessing journals and stuff. And you're going, oh well, I'm thankful I got up. I'm thankful that, and you're going, is this really what I'm thankful for? I mean, is this what I'm supposed? You want something big and dramatic, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
All right. So we've identified rituals. We've identified being intentionally grateful. Um, what are some other ways that we can kind of uncover, okay, those things in our life that have hold on us that cause us to maybe in some ways compromise our faith?
I'm sorry. What was the last compromise? What? Oh, our
Faith,
faith.
faith. They become our idols.
I think maybe like accountability.
Ah,
Um,
so if you're unable to see something for yourself, can someone else help you to identify it and maybe reframe things?
Like a therapist.
Like a therapist. I'm actually surprised that when you were talking, Herman, that wasn't the first thing that came out of your mouth.
Can you recommend anyone, Herman?
So yeah, so I think, in some ways, we have our own blinders on, and it sometimes requires uh the help of others. Now, sometimes that's professional help. Sometimes it's, a therapist. Sometimes it might be a spiritual director. Um, but I would even say in this day and age where loneliness is a, major
Hmm.
health epidemic, that, just having a couple of strong and deep relationships with others that's kind of based upon, uh, you know, love and honesty can be helpful as well. So that idea of accountability. Think about it. That's deeply Wesleyan.
Hmm.
You think about, when
The groups, yeah.
yeah, when John Wesley was, seeking to be, um, or develop, folks who were, um, you know, more pious, okay, that were, moving along, that were, jettisoning some of this stuff. One of the big things that he had was to develop small groups, the the bands, and the sects. um, and they were designed for different things, but one of the big ones was accountability,
Mhm.
where you can come and you're honest about your struggles. What have you succeeded at this week, and also what have flubbed up this week. So it requires a bit of vulnerability, requires a lot of honesty, and a lot of courage. But, you know, developing those relationships. And I like Deb's word. What's her word?
Intentional.
Intentional. Intentional. I mean, a lot of us might have relationships with people. They might be deep, deep friends, but, you know, are they intentional and purposeful for this? I mean, when John Wesley developed those groups and you joined the group, it was okay, I'm joining this group. I'm doing it intentionally, but it's also, this is purposeful. This is what it's here for. Um, and I think that can be helpful, but in some ways, what is it? It's difficult.
Hmm.
It's difficult. Does
Well, it
anybody
makes
ever?
you
Go ahead. I'm sorry,
vulnerable.
Deb. Sure.
No, it kind of makes you vulnerable
Mhm.
in a way that people don't usually like to be.
Right. Exactly. And it needs to be actually, it needs to be done in a spirit of love. Because a lot of us, when we're engaged in that kind of stuff and there's criticism, we want to kind of fight back. We want to be
Hmm.
protective. Any other ways that we can, kind of uncover or help to uncover, maybe some of those uh, hidden idols or distractions?
So if you want to identify particular distractions like that, one of the easiest one would be your time spent. If you spend a lot of time in something, that's it gives you a clue that you probably value that a lot, and
Yep.
there's something to be looked into. You know,
Right. I think another thing is along with that is it's not only your time, but typically what do you spend your money on too?
resources. Yeah.
Yeah, your resources. So, those two things, your calendar and your checkbook or debit card or whatever have you, will give us clues as well. Does anybody here ever do a life plan?
No.
What do you mean?
A life plan. So it's sort of, it's a meditative process by which you want to identify your life's purpose, your life's goals, that kind of thing. Or maybe you haven't developed a life plan. Have you ever taken time and written your own obituary?
Oh,
Oh my goodness.
no.
Yes,
Mm.
I have.
So, so one of the things, that becomes an interesting kind of proposition in the sense that, you ask the question, when my days here are numbered and I die, what would I want my obituary to say about me? And, kind of as you think about that, you say, okay, um, typically in an obituary, what are we trying to identify?
Accomplishments.
Accomplishments. So what are the accomplishments that we value the most? Right? So if you kind of think about that and then you work your way backwards, okay, you develop, okay, what is my, life's what's the word just went out of my head.
Goal?
Well, a goal, but yeah, I guess, you could use the word goal.
Purpose.
Purpose, thank you. Your life's purpose. Okay. And then you understand what that purpose is. And that becomes sort of the driver upon which you kind of live your life and make your decisions about, okay, what's really important, what's really not important, what gets my yeses, what gets my nos. Because for every yes, I have to say no to something else. Um, and so, if I'm saying, using Debbie's, um, example, if I'm, on fire for God, and my vocation is to, do all this wonderful stuff for God, right? Um, so I'm saying yes, yes, yes. So I'm saying no to something else. Okay. And so, what are the things I value the most? Because I would say if my life's purpose, number one, is to cultivate a deep, lasting, uh, meaningful relationship with God, that becomes my one of my life goals, my purpose in life. Um, I need to think about that first. And I make decisions based upon that. If my life's goal is, hey, God's first, but then I am called to be, a father and grandfather who is going to nurture, guide, direct, and help uh, influence my kids and grandkids to grow up to be, whatever it happens to be you know so you take the time. It's a very meditative and reflective process, but it's something that you develop that and you have it. I wish I would have done that when I was much younger. I probably would have been much different than I am now because, like I said, it helps to really evaluate, where you go, your paths you go down to, the things to say yes to, the things you say no to. And so that can help us in the way of temptations. If you think about, okay, we have these Israelites, they're about ready to go into the promised land. Okay, take a pause. You're going to take a 2-3 day personal retreat as a community, and you're going to develop your life's plan. Okay, then you move through, and as you're settling on the promised land. Okay, what are the goals, and what are the decisions I'm going to make, and how am I going to make them? Any other thoughts? Because this isn't. I wanted to spend a lot of time doing this because, if you think about it, we all have idols. If you think about it, it's something that really irks God. It leads to death and destruction. So if all of those things are true, then we really need to be more vigilant and in some ways more intentional about the ways that we approach this. So if we have intentional tools and things we can think about, it's helpful. Other thoughts?
As I'm thinking about this,
Mm-hmm.
When I that year that I committed to maintaining that attitude of gratitude, now that I think of it and reflect on it, that helped me give up a lot of those. I don't want to call them idols, but I call them distractions in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So it allowed me to get rid of a lot of that stuff
Right.
because you're just more in the moment. You're
Mhm.
grateful for a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So,
Helps direct your attention. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
That they
Hearing.
say it's easier, you have use more muscles if you're smiling and than you do if you're, so if you start out the day miserable, you're going to be miserable all day. If you force yourself to be thankful for the moment or whatever, like Herman said, you know, things have to get better no matter how bad it starts out or how bad it seems. I think it's all in an attitude of thankfulness.
Yep.
and for me, it was rather easy. Guess why? Because I'm always reframing things for other people.
Oh,
This is true.